Yo, what's going on, guys? I'm going to be reviewing two cards, Miradora, Skywing of the Whirlwinds, and also Pot of Disparities. So before you start, friendly reminder to like and subscribe, and yeah, let's jump right into it. So the first one is actually a hand trap, and it's a Wind Dragon effect monster level 7, so maybe it's Phantasma's cousin, we never know. You can only use each effect each effect once per turn, basically. It's a hard once per turn, it's a use, so if it gets negated and you have another one, you can't use it again. So if your opponent special summons a monster with 2000 or more attack from the extra deck, you can special summon this card from your hand. It has to be from the extra deck, and it has to be 2000 or more. And if this card is special summoned from the hand, it's only from the hand. It doesn't necessarily have to be by its first effect, but the first effect will trigger the second effect. You can target one face-up monster your opponent controls that was special summoned from the extra deck. That target cannot activate its effect while this card is face-up in a monster zone. I have three things to say about this. So, first of all, it says target one face-up monster your opponent controls that was special summoned from the extra deck. It doesn't have to be the monster your opponent just summoned. So, I don't know, usually when people actually link summon and stuff, or Xyz or Synchro, they use the effect right away, but maybe there was something else that your opponent actually did not use the effect yet, and you want to negate that card instead, but it didn't have 2000 or more attack, so you actually had to wait. Maybe that could be a possibility. And also, sorry, there is something that I completely forgot, I completely neglected, and it will be maybe one of the only reasons why this card will ever see play. Each effect cannot actually be negated, and their effects cannot be negated, so your opponent cannot do anything about it. He can still respond to this, but he just cannot negate anything, so it is actually quite nasty. Your opponent can have 3 Appaloosa, you can only control that one Appaloosa. You can have Appaloosa with infinite attack, Herald of the Arclight multiplied by 10, and you can still use this card, so that's actually kind of neat. And yeah, the target cannot activate its effect while this card is face up in a monster zone, so this is two things. So first of all, it doesn't actually negate the an effect that is already going on. It just stops like a monster from even like attempting to use this like an effect. So in a way that could be good, in a way that could be bad. For example, if you Valor a Neptibus, it's still bad for you because they paid cost, which is like a +1 because they're sending like Dragoons from the deck to the grave, so they still get a search. But if you stop him from even activating its effect, he can't even pay cost. So that is actually, it's a double-edged sword because sometimes you want your opponent to like pay cost, because it's actually something that would make them neg. They have to maybe discard a card or something. Like in the instance of Dragoon, usually if they negate with Dragoon, they are going -1. But when they are using like Neptibus, for example, that's bad for you. I can't really think of too many extra deck cards that have this effect, and this only really hurts extra deck monsters. But still, and also, it only stops them from activating that effect while this card is in a face-up monster zone. So this is kind of bad because if your opponent can actually just not use the effect of the monster you negated yet, because nothing was negated technically, it's just your opponent cannot activate its effect. If they can make a Cerberus and destroy this, you are in huge deep trouble, because then they can just activate the effect of the monster and you're kind of just screwed. And Needle Fiber has 1500 attack, so that's actually like a huge card that this card just cannot stop. And even if Needle Fiber had 2000 attack, you summon it and then Needle Fiber is already resolving. It doesn't negate in the same it stops him from activating its effect, sure, but you're chaining it like as a chain link 2 to Needle Fiber already using its effect. So I don't think this card is going to impact the game whatsoever. I think it is a tech card that will just sometimes see play. It's definitely not on the same level as Phantasme. And if Phantasme is dropping in popularity right now because some decks can actually afford to not link summon. So yeah, sure, maybe sometimes in game 1s it could be decent, or it can be bad in game 1s but be very good in game 2 and 3. But it's just not a card that is actually really too worth it at the moment, so I'm not down for Phantasme, and this card is no better. I would not consider this card too much. Anyways, the second one is a bomb, so I woke up to today, this morning, reading this card, and I had one of the biggest smiles on my face, because it is support for pretty much my favorite deck of all time. You can only activate one card with this card's name once per turn, so Pot of Disparity, a normal spell card. you cannot draw any cards with card effects during the turn you activate this card. So, in other words, this card conflicts with Upstart Goblin, Pot of Extravagance, Pot of Desires, Danger Monsters, but it does not conflict with Pot of Duality, because Pot of Duality does not draw, it actually excavates and then gets a card. Basically, Pot of Duality loses to Mistake, and this card is no different. So, first of all, look at the image of the card. Does it remind you of something? Yeah, of course it does, huh? It's one face of Extravagance, and then the other face is the face of Duality. To be honest, Duality actually looks really similar to Generosity. Except if I'm like really stupid and I'm not seeing it. But don't worry, this is not a Pot of Generosity. I don't think Konami is like crazy enough to actually give us like a Generosity combined with something else. Anyways, you can banish either 3 or 6 cards from your extra deck face down. Did you notice something? It doesn't say random, so you actually choose the amount of cards you want to banish from the extra deck. Oh, of course, it's only face down, so it's not really a resource that you might actually use, unless you can... Actually, you can go Omega, return back a face down card back into the graveyard, and then if that card, you know, had an effect in the graveyard, for example, I guess Fossil Warrior Skull Knight or Wind Pegasus at Ignister, you can use it after, but it's not. Come on. Anyways, excavate that same number of cards from the top of your deck, add one of them to your hand, and place the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. It's a combination of Duality, Skull Deet, because it puts back on the bottom, and also it's the number of cards that you actually banish. So let's just say I like my extra deck, okay? I don't want to, like, be separated from my extra deck because I have a love story with my extra deck. You know, I can afford to do a little payment, you know, banish 3 cards. And then this card is basically treated as a Pot of Duality. That doesn't stop you from special summoning for the rest of the turn, which is nice. The only thing it does stop you from doing for the rest of the turn is, I mean, it just halves the battle damage. I mean, halves any form of damage, so it's not the end of the world, to be honest. You can just use this in main phase 2 after dealing enough damage. Because it does say, like, after this card resolves, whereas the first drawback, it's like during the turn you activate this card. So, alright, if the activation gets negated, you can still draw cards. Interesting. But yeah, as I said, it's basically like a duality that actually gives you a choice. Do you want a duality for 3 or do you want a duality for 6? If your hand is really bad, duality ing for 6 could be a good option, because... you know, it's almost like you're drawing 6 cards sometimes because your hand is just one small little piece away from being beautiful. And then when you do get that piece, all of your 5 other cards, for example, they become live. So that is the reason why Pot of, you know, Duality was always good, is because it actually made your hands better out of nowhere, where Desires, you're getting 2 random draws, so you're like, what if the card that I really needed was the other one at the end, you know? And Desires, not to mention, actually has a really huge cost of banishing 10 cards from your main deck face down. That's bad. If Desires gets ashed, you feel like really dumb, because even though it is a 1-for-1 and technically not really like in your opponent's favor, it's still kind of in their favor because you banish 10 cards, and it's not a really good thing unless you're playing Ren Maju, but this card is nasty. This card is so good. I love it so much, man. If you're going second against, like, trap decks, for example, you can actually banish 6, and then the odds of getting Lightning Storm, Harpy's Feather Duster, Evenly, Reboot are gigantic. Gigantic! I just mentioned 7 to 8 cards. That's a lot, because you're excavating 6, like 3 to 6 cards. So it's kind of like if you were drawing like a second hand, and you were like, what do I need in my first hand that I have in my second hand to be able to beat my opponent? And that's exactly what this card brings. So this card is definitely a huge pot. Definitely going to power creep Pot of Duality, but not necessarily, because some decks can actually play Pot of Duality in conjunction with this card. For example, Altergeist, now you can be like, okay, I don't have to play 3 of everything. I can just play like 3 Hextia and then 1 of some things. And then, you know, I don't really care about card advantage that much, right? It's Altergeist. It doesn't need the card advantage that desperately. And the battle damage that you have is just like, who cares? And you don't really have draw power. Extravagance was the only draw card, if I recall correctly. So being able to consistently draw into that Faker, which, like I just said, is the one card that you need in Altergeist, for example, is absolutely fantastic. And man, it can be a double duality too. That's crazy. Sure, you only grab 1 card, even if you banish 6, but still, man. Oh, I'm really happy. I love this card so much. And yes, it will see play. But that's pretty much all I had to say for this review on Pot of Disparity, and I already forgot the name of the card. Yeah, Miradora Skywing of the Whirlwinds. That's what happens when you're just so charismatic and nobody really cares about you. But that's about it. So thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, blah, blah, blah. And I will see you tomorrow. Yes, peace.